All right, and we are rolling episode 24 of Chasing 69, a New York Jets podcast. And boy, oh boy, we've got a special event today. Alongside me, as always, Teddy Pristash, but we got two others joining the podcast today. We got Scott Graham, Mike Miceli, and boys, it's an AFC East preview. How are we all doing today? Nothing. This is perfect. Scott, how are you doing?
Nobody knew what to say there.
All right,
Scott, how are you?
Otherwise, we'll be
How's your day going?
I'm doing well. Great work week. I'm calling myself the great Slambino. So can't complain.
Why are you calling yourself that?
Because I've been slamming a ton of deals at work. The great Slambino.
Congrats, that's sick.
Thanks. So I can't wait for football to start. Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend's coming up. Spending 5 days at the lake and then lead into Thursday night football. And I cannot wait to get football on and talk about football. We've pretty much done this entire podcast like 10 times over the last 3 weeks in the group chat. So it's glad we're going to have something kind of out there in the ether for everyone to listen to. And I don't want people to get annoyed with the Patriots talk because everybody else, whenever I talk to them, does. So please don't fast forward through my parts. I'm worried about that.
This is going to be
Homer.
Yeah, this is going to be like
this is a Jets podcast.
Yeah, well, I feel like this is just going to end up being like an hour and a half glimpse into what our daily conversations are like. Because we are part of the Dr. Locke's group chat, and
right.
Mike, did I go Miceli on you there?
No, that's right. That's right. No,
I did it. Okay, cool.
Miceli,
Mike, how are you doing
good
today?
I'm ready, man. Unlike Scott, I'm not the great Slambino. I've actually been kind of rushing through this week, looking forward to tonight. But same as Scott, ready for the season to start. Kind of feel like I've been rushing through August, just reading all this preseason hype, and there's so much to read. Everyone's talking about the Bills now, so I'm kind of just ready to see it happen.
Yeah, every podcast that we've been doing, Teddy and I started off like, hey, we're almost at football season. It's next fucking week. Teddy, how excited are you? We finished up preseason recently. We got all the rosters cut down.
This is a perfect time to do this AFC East preview interview or AFC East preview podcast, because around this time is when my expectations for the Jets start slowly becoming more realistic. So like all offseason, I'm like, the Jets are going to be awesome. Like they're going to be top 10. Like, and then I get to hear and I'm like, maybe they'll win 6 or 7 games. So I think it's just good that we're going to like get a glimpse into the division as a whole, and kind of, it's easy to forget the context of how good other NFL teams are when you're just thinking about the Jets from 3 years ago compared to them now, So I think it'll be fun. And I think, as optimistic as me and all these other Jets fans are, I think it's important that we remember that, there's a lot of really other good teams in here.
Definitely. Yeah. And so a little bit for the rundown today, we're just going to go team by team. The reason we have these two on, Mike is our resident Buffalo Bills fan, Scott, our New England Patriots fan. And we're all going to kind of talk a little bit about the Dolphins as well, too. I've got some stuff that I want to share, and I'm sure you guys have some opinions on them as well, too. We'll hit some Jets stuff. Teddy and I were talking beforehand. We're not really going to go too much into the roster that they've, cut down to, or preseason game 3. I think that stuff better save maybe toward next week as we prepare for the season and talk full year expectations. But we're just going to run through team by team, give some predictions at the end as well, too. And then I was going to throw this out here. I think personally, because we're all experts on our football teams and on the AFC East here, that we just take a look and we keep note of our records that we predict for each team in the division. And maybe it's even standing. And then whoever has the worst or most inaccurate predictions for the division owes the boys a dinner the next time that we're all in town together. And I didn't bring this up beforehand because I was going to think that one of us was going to back out and call us pussies for doing that. But what do we think? How we feel about a little competition here?
I'm in for that.
Perfect.
I'm in. I knew this was going to happen with this crowd, so I'm in as well.
After getting we got to put Scott's, I think I might be fine here.
Okay, perfect. I love this. Awesome. All right. Well, you know what, Mike, we're going to start right off with you because the Bills obviously are the class of the division now. Huge season last year. Team really takes that next step. Allen Diggs connection becomes one of the top duos in the league. The offense is fantastic. The defense is strong, albeit some injuries and some ups and downs throughout the year. They finished the season in the most heartbreaking fashion that you can imagine, just not getting your hands on the football in an overtime playoff game, and Kansas City moves on. Taking a look now, after being a team in the division, and even, if you want to go conference, that was always second fiddle to, the Patriots, who had this long enduring dynasty. How does it feel, with the tide turning in the direction of Buffalo being the team to beat in this division?
It feels good. But it's as quick as it comes, it goes. So, last season, that playoff game against the Patriots, the perfect game, that was awesome. Kind of the way I feel like that was almost like the peak, right? And then, you go into that Chiefs game, kind of heartbreaking. And then everyone's talking about the Bills all off season. So now you have to live up to these expectations, right? Dolphins obviously got better, new coach, trade for Tyreek, the expectations there are high. So it's tough. Obviously it's a great spot to be in, but sometimes it's almost nicer to be, clawing from behind. So big expectations, good roster. They made a lot of acquisitions. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah,
winning
and then
Super Bowl
Scott
is a hard task.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And then
Yeah.
Scott, on the flip side of that, being able to watch, you just were born into this dynasty at the right time. And even my little brother, who's a Patriots fan, and you two love hyping each other up over the Patriots. You just were born into this lucky situation where you didn't have to deal with the misery of the Patriots before. You just got success. Now it's been in this turn, and we'll get to your team more in depth a little bit later, where it's not as guaranteed that you guys are going to be this team always in the mix. When you take a look at Buffalo, what's that kind of transition been like the last few years, where you're like, oh shit, there's actually somebody we have to worry about?
Yeah, I definitely liked when all the other teams stunk way more. That made life a lot easier. But I mean, it's having the hype of a rookie quarterback is pretty cool. Like, I mean, I'd rather have Tom Brady for the remainder of his career. Like, if you said you could have Tom Brady or a first-round quarterback from Alabama, I'm taking Tom Brady. I don't care who the quarterback is going to be. But I mean, it's different. It's interesting. I like being able to be, I guess, like for lack of a better phrase, like a real fan, having a quarterback that you don't know is going to do well, just hyping them up for what I've made fun of mostly Jets and Bills fans in a lot of the NFL for the last 15 years of, oh yeah, this is going to be the year, this is the guy, whatever. And being on the other side, it's really fun to hype them up. I do love Mac Jones. I don't really have any reason not to. But we're not talking about Mac Jones yet, but it's definitely tough seeing the Bills be an absolute powerhouse, dominant force. Like, they have what the Patriots never had in terms of like those star players that are going to stick around for a long time. The Pats would sign Randy Moss, or they'd have these big dudes on defense, but like having the Josh Allen, the dual threat, the Stephon Diggs. I mean, Gabe Davis is phenomenal. McKenzie. You look at their running backs, so you don't need to use them that much, but they're very efficient and they do what they need to do. So it's really hard to poke holes in it, which is tough from being a rival in the division. So not as much fun as it has previously, but I'm excited for the uphill battle for the last couple of years, and for at least the next probably 2-3 years until they'll rise above the Bills.
Right. And then Teddy, I mean this in a joking way, because you've never really gotten to experience either of these situations, but when you take a look at what it's been like, is there, with the Brady Belichick dynasty, it's like it was this year after year of just like, fuck, we just are not going to get past this team. The Bills are on that come up, and McDermott and Allen seem like they are going to be around for a while. Is there any, I don't want to say hope, but what are your thoughts on, I guess, just looking at those two teams in the division after just being like, we finally are off of this Patriots thing where every year they're a wagon, and it's like, oh fuck, now the Bills are a wagon.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how hopeful I am that the Bills aren't going to like just continue to be good for at least the next like 3 to 4, even that seems like a short prediction. But what I will say is, for a long time of my life, it was I mean, Scott was born into this like great time where the Patriots have just always been great. That's when we were born as well. So it was just so annoying that it was always the Patriots, always Tom Brady. So when the Bills had their come up, I was kind of like about it, because I was like, good for them. It's not the Patriots at the top of the division anymore. And now it's like annoying because, again, we talk about all the optimism for this team and like the roster, but there's these great teams that they have to get over. And I think New England being the domino to fall would be like the most ideal if they could just be bad for once. Yeah. I would love for Mac Jones to just not be good. That would make me really, really, really happy. But yeah, and I do want to say, you wrote, what's it like never having that? There's no way we were ever projected to beat the Patriots, but I remember the year after the 2010 year that we went to the AFC Championship, before that season, I had a magazine, and who did it predict to be the Super Bowl winners? The Jets. So I've lived it a little.
So you've had a slight peak there where you just held on to this glimmer of hope. Good. Well, Mike, to bring it back to the Bills, now that you take this step and you're like, okay, we're one of the, top teams in the league, you still got to get past Kansas City. There are other teams in the conference as well, too. The Chargers that have made a lot of additions. You got Miami coming up. The AFC North is strong. Cincinnati, and their run. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, still going to be good teams as well, too. One of the biggest things that I think was missing from the Bills was that constant pressure up front. You think back to the Colts game, at least from what I watched, and you guys were dominated in the ground game. Jonathan Taylor, 5 touchdowns. He was just running the ball down your guys' throat. And then it's containing those quarterbacks on the edge too. And you need a strong edge presence. You guys go in and you bring over Von Miller, who just won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He's kind of the marquee addition for you guys this offseason. Maybe, there's a question about him specifically or the defense as a whole. How do you feel about that kind of working together to take that next step?
I love it, and I love that they got Von Miller. I know before they got him, Chandler Jones was out there. The Khalil Mack deal happened, and I was kind of like butting my fingernails, like, all right, we're going to get one of these guys, because that was like one of the biggest issues or focus areas in the offseason, right? And then when they got Von, I was like, holy crap! Like, not only is he going to make an impact on the field, he's old, but he still obviously won a Super Bowl and still performs in the playoffs. But I feel like just the impact he's going to have on all these other young defensive linemen and defensive ends is going to be, you can't really put a price tag or anything on that. And I think, they'll get home. They've always gotten that pressure. That was the one big thing last year, was they got a lot of pressure, but they never got to the quarterback. So I think he's going to help with that.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in quick on Von, just because I think it's the same thing that happened last year. And there's a lot of guys that like kind of fall into this category where it's like, oh, they're someone who was great, who, isn't at their peak anymore. They're kind of old, but they come and they can be like, okay, like that's kind of the expectation that was put on him last year. That's the expectation that's been put on him this year. I mean, he was awesome last year, especially in the playoffs when it mattered. Like he was
winner.
A star. It's not like he was just like, oh, a pretty good player. He was great. So, I mean, for the Bills, you look at, the Rams just signed him and it put their defense to the next level and helped them win a Super Bowl. And now the Bills go and it's one of their biggest needs and they get him. I mean, I think in the narrative, you always feel compelled to be like, oh, he's old, but he's still just always been good. Like he is obviously old, but he's just good as fuck.
Right. And then kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about like expectations, like you got a guy who's done it twice, right? He's got 2 Super Bowls, he's been around the league for a while. Yeah, 2 different teams. So, he can have that impact. You need a guy.
Keep those guys' feet on the ground.
You need guys who have been there to really kind of put you over the top.
And it's one thing for a player at that age to just be like, hey, I'm going to put you on the Houston Texans and you need to be our premier edge. He's joining a team that's got a deep front seven. It's got young guys that you've drafted the last few years. At Oliver in the middle, you've got you guys drafted Karlaftis recently. No, Epinesa 2 years ago.
Epinesa, yeah. Yep.
Epinesa. So there's young guys in there.
Good talk out of camp from him too. So we'll see.
Perfect. Scott, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I can't let all this hype go up without kind of trying to find a little plan in there. I remember when it happened, like the deal, 6 years for a 33-year-old, pretty nuts. Obviously he's got an opt out. They're probably not going to pay him after that, but his cap hit, I'm looking at this article here so I can get my facts right from one of your coworkers, Jarrett Bailey at Sports Illustrated. Blake.
Nice.
The cap hits are kind of nuts, and I don't know. I mean, you don't obviously if you win Super Bowls, who cares about the cap hit? You know, like it's not your money as a fan, and the owners. If you have owners who spend, it's awesome. For next year, it's only going to be 15 million. Is what it says, or no, 5.15 million. So like really, really low for this year. But after this year in 2023, it jumps up to 18.7 and then 21.2 in 2024. So I mean, at what point do you start to get a little like you got Diggs on the book, you got Allen on the book, you got a 35-year-old Von Miller on the books. You're gonna have to pay some of these other dudes. I wonder at what point for the Bills that signing, it's almost like, yeah, I mean, if you win a Super Bowl, it's all water under the bridge. No one's going to say anything. But if they fail, they don't win the Super Bowl, are you going to pay Von Miller $21 million in 2024? That's a lot of money to pay a 36-year-old dude when you have other young guys on the book. That's my only.
I somewhat agree with you, but also, I mean, you look around the league with the way that these teams can manipulate caps, like you can get out of that pretty easily. It's a pretty front-loaded deal. I think Allen's deal doesn't hit for another 2 years, or maybe it's next year. Blake, correct me on that.
I think it starts next year.
Next year, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Not even just, I guess, not even just focusing on Von Miller, but there's guys coming up that are going to have to get paid too. Ed Oliver's going to have to get paid. Gabe Davis is going to have to get paid. I think that's I think I would redirect your point to there, which that would be a concern.
Has Poyer gotten paid yet?
Nope.
He's got to get paid, and then there's another dude I always forget, other than Trade White. Who's the other?
I could see
Micah Hyde.
Micah Hyde
got paid. He's on the deal.
Paid. Gotcha.
I could see them. I
those
could
are
see them
some
moving on
good
from Poyer
dudes
after
already
this year.
getting paid.
You guys pay Edmonds yet? We're just gonna run through every guy.
Yeah, right.
No, Edmonds,
So who
Edmonds
they
hasn't
pay?
got paid yet.
Okay.
I think Edmonds could walk too. I could see that happening.
Thank God the Rams did what they do to at least give you guys like a blueprint or something, because I would have no clue what to do there. I'd be like, what the
That's
fuck?
just insane.
And
Money literally doesn't matter.
Right, and that's the hope. I mean, it's like in the short term, you want him out there all the time, but you're also hoping maybe some of these guys that we've drafted, invested in behind start to become premier names where he's not as necessary to the team. So, when you can start to cut away that money, you can do it. But then,
that's my only flaw I could find.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. We had to get a little edge in there. So then to redirect that to you, Mike, I guess, taking a look at the team, is there an area heading into the year that you're, position group wise, you're a little bit worried about?
Number one to be cornerback. I think we kind of hit on that earlier, just with Trey being out for at least the first 4 weeks now. They put him on PUP today. That's going to be, you got a rookie, Kyer, which, I think he's fully capable, but, played in the SEC. He's got that, big game mentality, but still a rookie. He's going out for week one, going to be against Robinson and Cup. Like, that's going to be a tough matchup. And then week 3, he's got to go Tyreek Waddle. Like, it's going to be tough. And the depth there is, I think, the
Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis. That's going to be tough.
Forgot about them.
Kendrick Bourne.
But I think that's
didn't forget about Kendrick Bourne. Did not forget about him.
Clip that.
But in terms of position group, I think cornerback is probably the one and only that I would say. The only other thing that is not position, but I kind of put into this category would be coaching. They got a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So, whenever you have any sort of coaching turnover, you got to think about that. And also, there's no hiding behind how last year ended. With the kickoff debacle and all this stuff, and we still don't really have an answer for what happened. Obviously, the special teams coordinator was fired, so there's a little bit of, clue there, but that's always going to be a question.
Yeah, that's the one story. The offensive coordinator leaving the quarterback that like the two of them spent all their time kind of ascending together. The hope is at the very least, you just like, this is what we've learned. So we're just going to keep this part of the offense. I never, you never want it to be like he's solely dependent on the coordinator. And, hopefully he's not, because, as you've seen year after year, he's only gotten better. But it is that one thing where you're like, if they're trying to change up the offense too much, you're like, okay, what's going to go on here?
And Dorsey was his guy. Like Dorsey, sorry. He handpicked Dorsey, like that was his kind of vote. So, and he's been there for a while. So I I think it'll be fine, but it is, it is a concern.
My question is, the Bills obviously like throw the ball a lot. I'm not sure if they were first in the league or like very close to that. Do you think they're going to throw the ball even more or kind of dial it back with the new guy, Dorsey?
I don't know if it'll be in terms of more or less. They probably will throw the ball more, but I just think their running game will be a little bit more dynamic. They got, new offensive line coach. So I think like Cromer, like they got a few new offensive linemen as well. So I think it'll just be a little more dynamic, and then with Cook as well. So I don't know about in terms of like quantity.
I've been hearing some rumblings that they're just gonna like pass, which obviously they're great at. So I just
right, and I think the Allen runs are going to go away. I think that's because Allen he had a lot of runs last year in games that he didn't really need to be doing that. So I could definitely see that. In terms of quantity of runs, the runs will just go more to the running backs as opposed to Allen.
I was gonna say they got to make a point of emphasis to not let Josh get hit unnecessarily. Like, I mean, I'm not an NFL coach. I don't know how like they factor all that stuff in there, but it just seems like I understand keeping the defense honest. But like a 2nd and 6 run with Josh Allen in a game in week 4, like I just feel like some of those plays they might just shy away from or do something a little different. Because I mean, he takes some hits. He's a big dude. He lays the wood himself. But I mean, it just takes one unnecessary hit, and you're going to have the entire city of Buffalo at your throat for that hit if it's a situation that people seem unnecessary, no matter what the game plan was or the script was. But that's what I would say. They got to make that a point of emphasis to not the unnecessary hits, to just kind of weed them out a little bit.
It does help that he has the body of a fullback too. So, like it's not like Kyler or Lamar or some of these other guys, Tua, that are just throwing their bodies around. He is fucking bricked up. He is a tough guy to bring down. So I at least think that he's got that to him. But yeah, obviously you give the man, all the money you give him, that you winning is attached to him. You do have to keep him upright. Mike, one last question, I guess, before we transition onto the Patriots. Is there a player on the team that has been gaining a lot of buzz in camp, or a guy that you're really excited to see that might not be as well known?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 2 guys, one on offense, one on defense. Offense is Khalil Shakir. I don't know if he's underrated. I know there's been a lot of talk about him, but he's a rookie, so I kind of consider him underrated. Hasn't done it yet. I don't know if he'll be like, super fantasy relevant in terms of the stat line, but I think he's a guy that's going to come to the league, be able to get open quick, sure-handed, get you 3rd and 4, like he's your 4th receiver on the field. I think that's, very crucial to have on a team like this. And then also on defense, I'd say Tim Settle. We talked about the Colts game earlier, the Titans game last year, like where they just got gashed for these big runs. The Pats game, Damian Harris, like you can list off the, one big run every game that just, gashes them. So I think he'll be a big part in the middle. It's a big dude.
Give me his position.
Defensive tackle.
Oh, word. Yeah. All right.
Nice.
So that's a big dude in the middle. He's going to be able to move some bodies around. So we'll see.
That one big run in the Patriots game when it was the negative 20 degrees was the first points of halftime. I think it was, or did it lead to the only? I think it led to the only touchdown.
That was the only touchdown of the game.
It was that 50-yard run. That was literally it. That essentially was the game.
What a crazy game.
Yeah, that game shouldn't have happened. But
see, and I just hear big run Patriots game, and I think of Jonathan Taylor just ripping that game winner off in Lucas Oil Stadium. That felt great, Scott. I'm gonna sneak in my
playoffs, didn't they?
I'm gonna. Oh. All right, moving on. Any more Bills talk before we move on to the Patriots? Fuck.
Nah.
All right,
just fuck them.
All right. Well, now Scott, you got me mad. So let's talk about your offense. This is what's going to give me some comfort here. The New England Patriots. Yep. It seems like every report I hear, almost daily, at the very least weekly, is just the offense is not looking good. And there's a lot of reasons you can say for that, whether it's throwing in there Matt Patricia and what's the other fucker's name?
Joe Judge.
Yeah, Joe Judge. It's just throwing those two in there when they don't have any offensive experience. And at the end of the day, yes, Bill has his input into it, but now you've got Josh McDaniels, who's in Vegas. The offensive line apparently doesn't look as strong either. The receivers are still struggling. It does just seem that the offense as a whole is a little bit worrisome. And when you hope for a young quarterback, it's that hope that you're giving him continuity. And he's having to deal with a lot of changes here. When you take a look at the offense as a whole, and even if you just want to look at the play calling, where do you stand, a week before the season kicks off?
So my biggest cop out that I've had forever is just, well, it's Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Like, they're going to figure it out.
Right.
It's starting to get it's like Ted, when he was mentioned earlier, like the realization of what's actually going to happen kind of sets in. The fandom kind of fantasy starts to creep out, and you're like, oh shit, the season's in a week and a half, and we do have Matt Patricia and Joe Judge on the sidelines on the offensive side. Mike, if you do need a special teams coordinator, Joe Judge is at the ready to get the hell off from the sidelines. But no, that was one of the biggest things, is like the Patriots additions this year, and it's like, well, they got Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, but it's more subtraction by addition. I mean, they don't have any offensive experience. Patricia he's kind of like a joke in the NFL. Like, he has the pencil and the clipboard, and he tries to be Bill Belichick. And when coaches try to be Bill Belichick, they fail. Like, you can't do that. I mean, Joe Judge tried to do it at the Giants. They would be running laps and doing this, like things that you associate with Bill Belichick, and you just can't do it. So I'm hoping they take a step back when they kind of back to, like, essentially in their place on the Patriots. Like, you don't have to be the big dog. You don't have to make the decision. Just do your job. Do what you're good at, and the rest will fall. So I'm really hoping that Bill Belichick was a lot like the man behind the curtain with the Josh McDaniels stuff. So he won't necessarily feel like the impact of him leaving, because there was Bill Belichick the whole time. I do have this one quote in here. I was actually doing some prep and research on it. And I came across the screen at work, and it said, ultimately, I'm responsible for all of it. I have the final say in everything. So I believe in Belichick until we can't believe in Belichick anymore. That was a quote from Blake, and I don't know why I would stop believing in him. It's just, I'm a little more skeptical this year than I have in the past, due to all the changes in the second year quarterback. So that's where I stand on the coaching staff. We're gonna have to see where it goes, and if it starts to crumble, I just might have to eat it and say, well, yeah, we had Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, and if we're doing well, just gonna say, well, it was Bill Belichick the whole time, and kind of cop out on that way. But we're gonna have to see a lot. At least the first 6 weeks, I think, will be a decent indicator of what needs to change or what is working.
And that's the weird thing about it, is it's just one of these situations where we've never seen this before, where it's like, we're just going to have guys take on new jobs they have zero experience in and just see how it goes. And Teddy, it makes me think about other teams, and nobody is, I mean, there's like people that are panicking a little bit about the situation, but like you said, Scott, it's like hey, it's Bill Belichick. It's the greatest coach of all time, the best to ever do it. Let's just play out the season and see how it goes. Can you imagine, Teddy, if you're heading into the Jets season in 2021 and you have two coaches, putting together a young offense with maybe not the best playmakers out there in the world, and you have two guys calling plays that just have never had any experience? Like, can you imagine what that reaction would be in New York?
It sounds like something we've probably done that I just wasn't aware of.
Adam
these
Gase
guys used to be defensive coaches,
Adam Gase,
here
probably.
they go. Yeah. I think obviously the media and the fans would be way more up in arms, way more like, oh, these guys are going to stink. I think the biggest difference is in what would have actually happened. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the Patriots, because I kind of, same as Scott with the why would you doubt the Patriots and Bill Belichick? Every year, it seems like we always want to, and every year it's not worked out. Obviously, they don't have Brady anymore, but still, that's just kind of how it goes. But if the Jets did this, they would be horrible. They would be 1-15. That's just what would happen, So I think that's the biggest difference. And I think I've been friends with Scott since, I don't know, 7 years ago. We've watched football together basically that whole time. And that was the most I've ever heard him be doubtful and pessimistic of the Patriots in my life, and it's it really does stem back to Brady. And also last year was the first year. It's like, okay, it's not Brady, it's a rookie. Maybe they'll crumble, and they have a winning record and they make the playoffs. So now I gotta hope for year 2, lack of continuity. Hopefully they crumble, and I've yet to be right so far, but maybe this is the year.
And to your credit, at least, I mean, they started off the season, what were they, 9-4? So there was a late season crumble there. At least they still snuck in there, but
they were 9-4.
I don't know if 9-4, but I remember like being like, oh,
I heard
there's
that
not
somewhere this morning.
I don't think it was 9-4, but they looked good, and they looked like it's like, oh, so we're not going to skip a beat at all. Like it's just going to keep on moving. But I mean, later in the season, quarterbacks get better, teams get better. What Tom Brady or an experienced quarterback would improve from week 7 to week 13 is going to be way more than what Mac Jones would do. He doesn't know what to look for. He doesn't see the coverage. He doesn't know the player's tendencies. So I think it's fitting for a rookie quarterback. Like teams learn him. They learn what the Patriots are trying to do with him. Take him away. So I think that, to a lot of teams' credit, figured out, okay, this is where we can get him. So I'm hoping year 2. I don't know if we had any more comments on that, but it did lead into one of my next points about Mac in the Patriots offenses. I just want to see him be more aggressive. He's got a pretty ball. Like you've seen that deep pass. I don't know if you guys saw that pass on the sideline about two games ago. I think it was the second preseason game. Like 55 air yards, just dropped it right in the bucket. I do want to see more of that. Hunter Henry, Johnny Smith, both their second years in the system. I'm really hoping they pick it up more and we utilize them more. And then with like Devontae Parker, I mean, cool. We got Devontae Parker. He's not a stud, but maybe he's just that big target. The Patriots, he's an upgrade in N'Keal Harry. He's a big guy, can go up and get the ball. So if he just takes some more shots, he's really good about not making dumb plays. He takes his chances as you want a rookie. You want him to throw picks like Zach Wilson. You want him to try to make those throws that probably can't make, but at least he's thinking about it. He's like, I'm gonna make that throw. He's not just hitting the check down, hitting the slants. So with Mac, just seeing him become more aggressive, and I hope the play calls kind of allow him to do that in a way.
Well, and there's this new thing with the NFL, and it's a smart thing because offenses seems to be leading the way. But when you have a young quarterback and you're like, we're just going to commit to this guy, the plan is to surround him with all this talent. We can all agree the worst quarterback, and well, I guess maybe it's a toss up. Some people would maybe want to say Zach, but the worst quarterback in this division to me is still Tua. And yet they're probably going to have a really good season because they draft Jalen Waddle at 6, because they traded for Tyreek Hill, because they bring in an offensive coordinator that's one of the smartest guys in the game. Josh Allen, they go get him Stephon Diggs. Justin Herbert's got great receivers. Burrow, they draft Jamar Chase at 5 instead of a tackle when they have the worst offensive line in the league, and they end up in the Super Bowl. So it's like when you have a quarterback that you say, okay, we're going to commit to this guy, surrounding him with weapons is the number one thing to make sure that goes well. You guys have spent a ton of money, but the names are always so
bad.
They're so Bill Belichick. It's like he's taking shots on guys that you would rather trade for Stephon Diggs. You would rather trade for Tyreek Hill instead of, signing Hunter Henry to a big contract or bringing in, Kendrick Bourne. When you take a look at the skill players, is there concern offensively when you look at all these teams that have really great offenses? Do you look and say these weapons, like I understand we're spending money, but I would rather have more talented guys.
100%. And then especially when you look into, like, if we're focusing mainly in division, I mean, you look at the Finns, they've got a phenomenal secondary. Grimes, do they still have Grimes? Who's their stud corner?
They've got Byron Jones,
Xavier Howard.
Xavier Howard. Yep. So you look at them, you look at the Bills. I mean, we've touched on already. I mean, Micah Hyde, Poyer, Trey White. When he comes back, you look at the Jets. They drafted Sauce Gardner. Like, you take off the Patriots, even if you eliminate one of the threats, what do you have left? You can put your number 2 cornerback on Devontae Parker most likely, or have the safety help over the top, or you eliminate one of the Patriots threats, and then you're like, okay, so we got Jacoby Parker or Kendrick Bourne out of the game. Now where are they going? We have to hit the tight end. We have to run the ball. So it almost makes them more one-dimensional without having a real stud receiver or a couple of really good receivers. So yeah, definitely stinks. Send the Patriots way forever. I mean, we'll sign Randy Moss at the end of his year. I mean, we got drafted dudes like Gronk and Edelman, but if you don't go and get those players. They sign the defensive players, and the defense. I mean, we're probably not going to touch on them much just because it's an offensive league. But their defense is phenomenal. They always sign dudes, and they've got a beast of a defense, and that's what's essentially going to keep them in the games.
Right. That was we didn't really have any talking points here defensively, just because I feel like if there was one thing that I trust is that Bill Belichick is going to have at least an above average defense, and it's deep up front. The linebacking core is a little thin, I'd say, and they've let some guys go, but young guys in the secondary that are really talented. I know, a couple injuries at cornerback. But I would assume for the most part, still going to be a pretty solid defense. Is there anything that you wanted to mention about them defensively, or is it kind of?
Yeah, I'll touch on them real quick. Just because I did make notes of it. I mean, Jalen Mills is there, really good corner. I mean, he's a one on a lot of teams. I mean, he's not the stud lockdown that you want, like when we lost J.C. Jackson. He's not the J.C. Jackson, but I think he's very comparable to Gilmore. Sean Wade and Terrence Mitchell probably are guys that not many people know. Sean Wade's a beast. Terrence Mitchell's also really good. And then just real quick, Kyle Duggar is the strong safety.
Kyle Duggar's a stud.
He's a monster. He's not the best coverage dude, but he's almost like Blitz Boy in a way. Where
I was gonna say it sounds like Jamal.
Yeah,
he
can come
lays
up
it down.
He does. So him, and then the dude that I really want people to take a note of is Adrian Phillips. He's the backup to Kyle Duggar. He's almost, if you took Kyle Duggar and took away a little bit of his power hitting and his run stopping ability, and you moved it over to his pass coverage. He's those dudes that you don't really hear of, and they're like, oh wow, that guy's like been there all game, or he comes up with a crazy pick. So Duggar, Adrian Phillips is where I would focus, and then Jabril Peppers. What is Bill Belichick going to do with Jabril Peppers?
Right.
So,
That's sick. That's sick.
Right.
I like him.
Yeah, so that'll be just fun to see what he does. I'm hoping it's not one of those letdown situations where they didn't give up much for him, so they don't really feel like a need to incorporate him. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Jabril Peppers doing something funky on special teams, or you have him come in and it's like, wait, is that Jabril Peppers in the slot? Like, even if it's just a distraction, like Bill Belichick would love to do something old school that Army did in 1930s that no one remembers.
Yeah, Army in 1930s was too busy with the World War, but
That's true.
That was over.
No, you're. Well, I guess we're getting into another one. No, that secondary is great, and every time they've drafted one of those guys, Duggar, Division II, Lenore Ryan, it was just like, okay, we're just gonna grab this guy out of nowhere. Sean Wade was Ohio State, right? I think he's a Buckeye.
Big Ten. I should have done more research.
I think he was a slot corner out of Ohio State, but. No, it's a really, they always find guys. That's what it is. It's like you guys have continuously lost stud corners, but it's because you guys have them in place to take over. And, one of the big things, J.C. Jackson was one of the biggest free agent acquisitions of the offseason. And people were like, well, the Patriots, they spent so much the year before on tight ends and wide receivers, they couldn't afford to bring him back in. It's like, well, they probably have a plan where he trusts himself defensively to find these guys. So, you've mentioned a couple of names there. Is there any other kind of underrated players that we should keep our eye on with the Patriots?
Underrated. I mean, mainly the defense. Goddardchuk from the Jags that they signed. He's an absolute stud on I think he's D end or maybe he moved to D tackle. And then you got Red Sleeves, Judon. I mean, he's not really underrated. Everyone knows him, but I mean, it's going to be, I think it's going to be frustrating for some. Matthew Judon.
Oh yeah, he's a goat.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to be teams are going to be annoyed. Like they think the Patriots don't have anyone on defense just because they don't have usually those big names. Like they'll get Josh Allen or they'll blow up a play in the backfield and they'll be like, oh, like those dudes are there. Like that D line is really good, and I mean it's just going to be really tough when you have scrambling quarterbacks. So I'm just hoping they can contain and bend but don't break, and that's been the philosophy for the last 20 years. Let them drive down the field, let them get 70 yards, hold them to a 40-yard field goal. do that a couple of times, and good things will happen.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I'm going to bring up about the Patriots before we move to the Jets. I was taking a look. I know I always talk about Warren Sharp in our group chat and the stuff that he puts out, but he puts out this yearly book, and it's just filled with a bunch of fantastic insight. Two of the things that I think have been his best indicators for a team's success is, obviously strength of schedule, everybody pays attention to, and that's a little bit based off Vegas and their win-loss records. But the new version of that is rest edge. And it's really like, how many weeks are you heading into a game with either better or worse rest against your opponent? Short weeks, guys coming off buys, guys traveling. So the Patriots have the 6th hardest schedule coming into this upcoming season, and the 2nd worst rest edge, where 10 games out of the it's 12 games out of the 17 they'll be at an edge deficit. So certainly an uphill battle for those guys. But when I say that,
it's
is
an
there
interesting
anything
tidbit there?
Yeah, I read that this morning, and I was just like, I've started to, my mind has flipped a lot on this division, and we'll get into our record predictions at the end, but I want to have faith in Bill Belichick. That's what I'll say. But I'm hopeful that he can figure things out. It's going to be an interesting year for sure.
I got one comment on that. And I think the rest rate for that, it comes down to preparation. I mean, if you're not, like, it doesn't matter how much rest you have, if you don't prepare the correct way, or you're not in your routine like you normally are, it's the NFL. You're going to get exposed. So I think that's a plus with Bill Belichick knowing what to do. The defense it's not a young defense. They're pretty experienced. They're not overly old, but I think they know what they're doing, kind of how to get in the routine. But then it goes back to losing Ernie Adams 2 years ago. I mean, you talk, like, part of my take, guys, whenever they get a Patriots dude on, they always talk about Ernie Adams because he's such a fascinating person. Like, he has things that, like, he never would have imagined. They always talk about him when the Malcolm Butler interception in the Super Bowl against the Hawks. That was his call. He told Malcolm Butler about that like 2 days before the Super Bowl. That one comment that he made won them the Super Bowl. So not having that guy that's been around football for 80 years anymore might come back and bite him a little bit in that regard. But it comes back to everything. I just trust Bill Belichick will get the team ready on a short week more than I trust them on a shorter week more than I do on a longer week, because they might, like Mac Jones and the younger dudes, might not know how to handle the longer bye against an experienced team or something. They're more likely to snap right into shape after a Thursday night or a Sunday night against the Bills. You go into a Thursday night or a Sunday night game against the Rams or something like that, where they know there's no time to stop. You got to keep the foot on the gas the whole time, even if they do get blown out or whatnot. I trust them to be able to turn it around.
Definitely. All right. Well, Teddy, I want us to move on to the Jets now. And before we get to you talking about them, I want to pose this to Mike first, then I want to hear Scott after as well, too. We talk every week about the Jets, and this was an offseason that was very exciting for Jets fans. It was a lot of free agent signings that people were really happy about, paying a lot of money for a strong guard, bringing in a safety like Jordan Whitehead. And then in the draft, 3 first-round picks, they go get Breece Hall. It's been a buzz of kind of an offseason for the Jets. And Teddy and I might have dwindled our expectations a little bit as we get closer to the season. But this offseason was like a look at the Jets. They're out there doing stuff. They're making moves. Mike, does any of that reach you as a Bills fan that's, seen the Jets year after year just be what they have been, especially recent history? Like, when you take a look and you hear about all that stuff, it's the Jets, I don't want to hear any of it? Or are you like, maybe they are doing something?
Yeah, I think they are building something. I don't know if I had the expectations that this year was going to come to fruition, because it still hinders on, Zach. Pretty much everything they're doing. Like, I love Breece Hall. I love Garrett Wilson. They made a lot of good moves, and there's a lot of excitement around him, but it just comes down to Zach Wilson. So until I see him, do it, I feel like that's kind of when I'll start to think about it. But I do think they're building something. His injury and the Becton stuff really kind of stunk, I guess, coming into the season, because, I was definitely we'll talk about it in the standings, but I was, we'll talk about in the standings.
Yeah. I
Um,
like it.
Little teaser.
Little tease there.
yeah,
business
Scott,
trick.
yeah.
but I definitely think that they'll be on the up and up.
Scott, what do you think?
It's a lot similar to the Bill Belichick, like why stop believing in them. Kind of the same as the Jets, even though they have made the turn. It seems like they've pretty much completed the turn from the downswing to the upswing. You can't say good things about Joe Douglas. What are the bad moves he's made? I'm not a Jets fan. I'm curious to what you guys would consider a bad move, but you look at his good moves. Trading Jamal Adams. It's probably one of the biggest fleecings that I can remember. Getting 2 first rounds for an older blitzing safety, it seems really good. Just the draft picks have seemed to at least hit, or they're not whiffs. And then the signings, it seems like the Jets are actually a destination that teams won't write off. Like where I think the last takeout last year, but 5 to 10 years previously, it's like you have someone who wants to be on a contender or even aspirations of a team contending. You're crossing the Jets, you're crossing the Dolphins, you're crossing the Bills, like you're crossing all those teams off the list. Now it seems like all those teams are, and Jets, are focusing on is like people are going to players are going to be like, well, yeah, it seems like they've got a different culture. I guess that's kind of a good way of putting it. It seems like everything's switched starting with Joe Douglas. So it's not as bad as it normally is. But like Mike said, until they do actually start to do it, I'm not going to put too much stock into it. But I'm more nervous than I have been previously, definitely.
See, Teddy, isn't that good to hear?
No, it is. And I think it's interesting that you kind of nailed it. Obviously you're not a Jets fan, but that is it. It's like, both of you, obviously expectations are high, but Zach Wilson still got to do it. We still have all these young players who maybe they take 2 or 3 years to really hit their stride. It's not like everyone is really great their first year. And then Scott, that's exactly what it's been. Is as rough as these past years have still been, Joe Douglas is the one giving me and all the rest of the Jets fans the confidence to be like, hey, I think something good is about to happen. So I think you nailed it there. But it's interesting that you even have that perspective, being detached from it compared to what I live and breathe every day.
Yeah,
I'm not completely detached. I'm
right.
I am sensitive, so I do get to hear it.
You do get to hear me hype them up. That's facts. I forget that we talk.
Yeah, every day. Teddy, taking a look at the Jets, and I guess taking a look at in the division specifically, is there any position group or area of the team where you're like, this is where we stand out amongst these other teams?
Yeah, I was intrigued when I read this question that you put on our little prep sheet here, but I don't think so. No, I don't think there's any position groups that you can say definitively the Jets have the best of them. I think D-line is the best bet, especially if you're talking like, okay, who has the best 8 D linemen or 9 D linemen, the deepest. I think that's probably easily the Jets. But when you're just talking about the first even 6 guys, the Bills and Patriots guys have just done it, and Dolphins have just done it and proved it more than any of these Jets guys have. Obviously I think Carl Lawson's going to be a stud. I think Quinnen Williams is going to hopefully develop into a game changer, but they have to actually do that for me to actually say okay, I think they're the best in this division.
I would say running back.
See, that was my next point. So I like that you brought that up.
Yeah.
When you
a lot of great ones.
compare Breece Hall and Michael Carter to, the Patriots with Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, Bills, Singletary, James Cook, the rookie, and Zach Moss, and then the Dolphins with Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert, I think you can make the argument for sure. But I don't, again, kind of with I have to see it. I think Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson for the Patriots have been too good of running backs for me to say this second-year player and this first-year player we haven't seen yet are better, and that probably just comes from just the fact that they're younger and haven't been playing. So I think that's more of just a respect thing, because I actually do think Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are both really, really good. I'm big fans of them, even though they're on the Patriots. So So yeah, I really don't. I don't think the Jets are there yet, but I think like obviously, you know, D-line's the first one that comes to mind. Running back, they have a chance. Secondary's hard because the division is so stacked in like with good secondaries. But I mean, you do hope like if Sauce Gardner can be like the best, you know, then that would be fire. But yeah, I think the division's a lot better than the Jets, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's where I was posing it to get you to say none, just to talk about, and you know, we'll get into, I guess, our thoughts on the teams and how they'll fare this season. But you're right, there are certain position groups I'll throw out there too, because I don't know, you know, we'll have to wait and see what it looks like. But from what I've heard, the offensive line in New England isn't, you know, as strong and consistent as it's always been. And there's some guys that, you know, you trade away Shaq Mason for a late round pick. Some other guys aren't living up to their expectations. Hopefully Cole Strange steps in there as a solid rookie. But, you know, the Jets invested a lot in their offensive line, whether it be early draft picks or free agency. Changes a little bit without having a healthy Becton. And then, you know, replacing him with a 38-year-old Dwayne Brown. But, you know, that's one position group that I look at too, where it's like, man, hopefully if they can really start to string things together and get healthy, maybe they can have a strong offensive line. Cause it's not like the division has, you know, a specific elite offensive line. So that's one that I'd give them to.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I'd agree with that. That's again, I mean, I feel like with the Jets, it's just you got to go out and show me, you know, we can all be hyped, but these guys got to actually do it. So maybe they will be good. God damn, I hope so.
We talk so much about the Jets, so I don't really know if there's anything else that you want to include on this. An underrated player. We've talked about basically everybody on this team at this point. Is there anything, you know, that you've seen with the 53 that came out, or
I think just right now, the clear underrated player to watch is Michael Clemens, you know, defensive lineman, wears number 72 for Mike and Scott. Keep your eyes on him. Any Bills, Pats, Dolphins fans that are listening. Only other guy I wanted to kind of throw out there, we're not really getting into like the roster cuts, but Blake, we've talked a lot about Jamie Sherwood and Hamza Nasruddin, both guys drafted as linebackers last year. Nasruddin got cut, but Sherwood, I mean, he's been playing middle linebacker. I've had my eye on him. He's had a very good camp and has gotten better. And is still on the team, didn't get cut. And, you know, CJ Mosley is, who knows if he's going to be on the team next year. So I think he's just like a guy, if he can step up and even just be like a depth piece this year, who's actually touching the field in meaningful moments, I think that could be a really good sign. So someone to watch.
There were a lot of interesting cuts that they ended up making. We don't need to go into all of them, but I mean, as shocking as like Bam played deservingly so for that RB3 role in preseason, I just never thought that they would cut ties with Tevin Coleman just based off of his experience in that offense. So not having Tevin Coleman around is a crazy cut to make, and some other decisions too. So I see you frantically searching something. Did I?
I just did not know we cut Tevin Coleman.
Yeah. Yep. Bam Knight.
I knew that we cut P Ryan, but I was not aware. But good. I like Zonovan Knight a lot.
Yep. So Coleman cut, Mims keeps it you know, on the depth chart, probably a trade at some point, even though the coaching staff seems to hold on to him. But we've got plenty of time to talk about the Jets.
I think this is where I'm going to Chris Collinsworth my way into the host chair, slide my way in.
Go right ahead.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, Blake.
Let's hear it.
Oh, okay.
Rattle them off.
Scotty.
Yeah, before you head out, CJ Mosley. He was like really good, wasn't he? Like a couple years ago. What's his deal, like contract wise and playing?
He was really good. He was like a veteran. We signed him. He played on the Ravens. Was awesome. He was good. He's been good with the Jets. Definitely. I think he got injured his first year, and then he played last year. He was definitely good, but he just, and especially on like this bad team, he was, you know, got a lot of tackles, makes a lot of plays. The guy kind of like, he's the guy who's kind of like knocking a guy out after he had an 11-yard run or something like that, you know, where he's making the play, but it wasn't like it was like a really outstanding play. I think he's fine, but I just think he's getting older. He's kind of getting worse as every year goes on. And I believe the Jets have an out after this year. So I don't expect them to re-sign him. So I think if a player like Jamie Sherwood could actually step up and grab that role, that would obviously be huge.
would he be a potential trade piece to a contender? I don't know him at all. Like, is he
I don't
good enough
think
to, like,
so. He's
not with the
too,
contract.
yeah, and like the leadership that he
Well,
brings, like
and
I feel like he's bought in with Salah, with the young guys. Like I feel like he's just very like in it. And the
people don't
Jets
care
are
about
about to be a
linebackers
contender.
anymore. People don't care about linebackers anymore. We've talked about this a lot, Teddy. It's the running back of the defense now. It just seems everybody either wants a great secondary or a front defensive line. I mean, there are good linebackers in the game, Shaq Leonard on the Colts, and there's a lot of good ones, but I don't know. It just seems like teams don't care as much anymore.
You load up on those DNs. You essentially have two.
Exactly. Just keep bringing pressure up front. All right, Ted,
all right, Blake.
Take it over,
so
King.
Here's the deal with the Miami Dolphins. All right. And I think that as a Jets fan, for all Jets fans out there, we always want to hope that the Dolphins are going to stink. We all know you don't like Tua. He may not be the best, but what do they do this year? They bring in freaking Tyreek Hill, one of the best receivers in the league. They got Jalen Waddle. They got Mike McDaniel in as head coach. I guess just to start off, where do you stand on the Dolphins? Do you have high hopes? Do you think they're going to be better than people think, worse than people think? Where do you kind of land on these guys?
NFL offenses have transitioned into two ways, and it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. It's like if you have a superstar quarterback, that's instantly you're taking your team into title contention. And if you don't, NFL teams have just decided it's like, okay, well, we're just going to make life as easy for you as possible. And we talked about this a little bit with Mac Jones and how they've spent money. It maybe hasn't been in the necessarily right places, but Tua, for what he's worth, is a decent enough quarterback. Obviously I liked other guys way more than him coming into the league, but it was never he is, a third round pick. I viewed him as a guy that you take in the first round, but I thought there were two other quarterbacks that were way better than him. So to take a look at the Dolphins this season, I'm starting to get a little worried because I don't know if NFL defenses are going to be prepared on how to defend both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle at the same time. Like usually you just keep a second guy over the top of the defense for Tyreek Hill. It's like you have your guy short, you have your guy deep, you've got two guys blanketed over Tyreek, but you've got a guy that's younger and just as fast on the opposite side now. And, Mike McDaniel is one of the smartest minds in football. He knows how to, he ran an offense that made an average quarterback or an above average quarterback, whatever you want to call Jimmy G, a team that was advancing to the Super Bowl and making deep playoff runs. Now you got Tua, you add in two speedsters. I don't think Tua is going to be this world beater. But the NFL has shown that you don't need to have an elite quarterback to win. You just need to make sure that your mid quarterback has a lot of weapons around him. And this is going to be a duo. If they can stay healthy, that's the one thing is like, these are two kind of receivers that, Tyreek's getting up there in age. You worry about his hamstring injury history. Waddle's also had a few injuries as well, too. If you start to lose those guys and maybe they're not popping off the same way they used to, that's when I would say, okay, we're not going to get the Dolphins explosion that maybe I'm thinking we could see offensively. But, just on paper, if they're fully healthy and Mike McDaniel is getting the ball out of Tua's hands in 2 seconds or less, if they're just going quick pass, get the ball to those guys in open field, I think it's going to be one of the tougher offenses to defend in football, which is crazy to think about because of how many great quarterbacks there are in the league. And Tua is just not that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting perspective, especially from you knowing that you're not a big Tua guy. I think bringing up what Mike McDaniel was able to do with Garoppolo is a really strong point, just with a quarterback who maybe isn't as dynamic as other guys in the league. Jumping to you, Mike, as the Bills guy, the Bills are the team to beat in this division. Obviously the Patriots have they were the team you overtook. You still got Belichick. But when you look at this Miami team, obviously with the quarterback situation, with the receivers that they were able to add, the addition of Tyreek Hill, do you view Miami as a better team than New England when you think about who's going to give the Bills the biggest threat in this division, or where do you kind of land on that?
Yeah, hands down, I'll put Miami as probably the biggest threat.
Really?
And pretty much for all the points that Blake just said, but I do think, there's still a lot of unknown with the new coach. There's always that, we kind of talked about earlier, that adjustment period. And I think having two is going to be, I think, functional in this offense. Those short yard passes. I mean, McDaniels has raved about the most catchable, accurate ball he's ever seen. Now, whether
was actually a crazy quote.
Yeah, whether that's true or not, but I mean, he still said it. So
yeah.
We'll in that sense, I think it'll be interesting. They'll be able to stay in games, but I do think in order to win these games, I think it's going to be you need the quarterback, and I think it comes down to who can make more plays.
Yeah.
And I was going through their schedule, and there's a lot of games they could easily just lose because they don't have that, in crunch time when you got to ad lib and you can't just go off of what the coach is calling. Are they going to be able to do that? And that's where I kind of give me a little pause for the Dolphins.
Yeah, but still, even with all that pause, putting them over the Patriots, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like based on the tone of this podcast with Scott's tone earlier with the Patriots, they're going in two different directions, in terms of trajectory of the team.
Yeah, and going over to Scott, I don't want to just make it the conversation of who's better, Dolphins versus Miami, because obviously I think I know or Dolphins versus New England, because I think I know who Scott's going to say. But just again, in general, kind of the same question, Scott, like where do you land with this Dolphins team with everything they've added? I mean, to me, it's one of the biggest question marks, biggest intriguing stories going into the season is how is this Dolphins offense going to look? What do you think about them?
Yeah, I think when I was living with you or very close with you, hearing all the Jet stuff, you get a little peek behind the curtain, things that the normal fan wouldn't see. And I'm in that position with AP down here, my roommate that's a Dolphins fan. So I get a lot of different Dolphins stuff, and it's impossible to ignore the positive things that they're doing. So, I mean, Jalen Waddle, I'm a huge Jalen Waddle fan. Tyreek Hill speaks for himself. I mean, the running backs, Chase Edmonds, I mean, they got the San Francisco OC who made it absolutely miserable to defend the run. So if you get even three quarters of what they had in San Fran, and you tie that in with you have I don't say Kittle, Gesicki, who might get traded, but he's there right now, and then you have Tyreek and you have Waddle. It makes it really, really tough. You're pretty much make it as very similar to the Patriots. You make it as hard as possible for Tua to make a bad decision. Just get it in, get it out. I do have two things I do want to say about the Dolphins. One thing that I'm looking forward to is seeing all of the Tua ducks, even the slow-mo Tua end-over-end kick pass. Give me all of those slow-mo videos of that. And then it will be an extremely dark day if we ever see Tua raise the Lombardi Trophy. I might have to retire as a football fan if that ever happens. Those are my two what to watch for the Dolphins.
And that's the thing with the Dolphins and with Tua specifically is if this was say he was in the draft class with Kyler Murray, take out Kyler Murray out of that draft class and put Tua in. Tua's the best quarterback of that draft class, but it's the fact that he's got Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, both right around him. Obviously Herbert goes a pick after, and it's just you're tied to who you're drafted next to. And those two guys, you would take them as two of the first names that would go off the board if you were drafting just an entire NFL team, put everybody in free agency. Those two guys are going at the top of the board, and Tua would be going a lot further down. So it's tough that he gets compared to those guys, but Alabama, all the winning he had, all of the hype that was built around him. So many people were banging the drum that he was the best quarterback in this class. And it just hasn't panned out the way that you would think so far. And, he's been banged up before. He played for a head coach that didn't have the most progressive offensive scheme. So you think, okay, maybe this is the year where you take that jump. But when you just look at the start to the careers that Burrow and Herbert have had, it's just you can't even compare those.
And this year's gonna be big for him too, because you've already seen, a team that's willing to, give up draft picks to get a quarterback that is gonna win. I saw something last night that I think Lamar, and puts on Instagram that he's interested in Miami. If he doesn't, I think he likes an Instagram picture of him in Miami jersey or something like that. Those little rumors and stuff, they get to him. So it's kind of I think after this year, might be the end of Tua.
Yeah, I agree there. And I think, I mean, all the Brady stuff. Like they showed their hand, they tried to do that. They tried
Right.
to make an upgrade at quarterback. And, it's kind of been the story of this Dolphins team the past 3 years, but it really kind of is like, it's kind of like reminiscent of the Broncos at this point. It's like they have the team. Are they going to have the quarterback? And I think they're definitely one of those teams to me that at least seems to be a good quarterback away from really being a contender.
Who do you guys think has the most pressure this year? Like probably Josh Allen, take him out of it. Like Tua or Mac. Like who do you think has the most pressure to have?
I think Tua, just because of the
performance up to
timing.
expectations?
I think, if Tua doesn't have a great year, especially with the receivers, he'd be out of there. Whereas Mac could probably have a subpar year and still easily have another year. But I also do think that it's kind of hard to envision Tua not being the quarterback with, it's hard to envision him having like a really bad year with the guys he has is my biggest problem there. But I would say Tua.
If you take out Zach Wilson knee injury, I would say out of those three people, I would say almost maybe Wilson has the most pressure. I think you can make an argument for that. I think you can make an argument for that with all the offseason moves that the Jets have made. I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but I could see it that way as well.
If Tua and Zach Wilson have really, really bad seasons and don't show any signs of progression, I could see both teams moving on from them. If you make those upgrades in Miami offensively and you're like, we're going to go from this team that it just wins with defense and we're just going to switch that entirely with a new coach, offensive philosophy, and weapons. If he doesn't take a step forward, it kind of a sizable step forward too, because it wasn't like he was just an average quarterback. Like there were games where they were going to Jacoby Brissett, and the year before they were going to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Zach Wilson, the same way. We've talked about this. If the Jets season doesn't go well, there's too many good quarterbacks coming up in this draft and guys that could be available, via trade or free agency, however that goes, where you're just like, man, sometimes you just got to say, we messed up. We got to try again and buy ourselves some more time to build. So I would say both those guys are really playing this year for their jobs.
And I don't think Max Jones has any pressure, if we're being honest.
His rookie season bought him time.
Yeah.
And
I was just about to say
all the news that's coming out of camp, like they're not, no one's going to blame Mac, right? With all the offensive coordinator stuff. Like
that's a good point.
Max showed he could perform last year. So, and we talked about the weapons and stuff. Like, in terms of pressure, like I feel like he almost kind of can, unless he's like really bad, obviously.
Do you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, I would say Tua. I mean, it's different, I think, when you're talking about your own team, because like I have certain expectations and like leaving the Patriots universe to like look at the other teams. Like if Tua and Zach Wilson have years, and they all hit their own expectations, like I'll be like, well, damn, look at those guys. Like Mac needs to do better to beat those teams. So I kind of do more of a comparison. That question was more like team, like per player specific. But if Mac Jones hits his expectations, but Tua and Zach Wilson exceed their expectations, it's all going to be on Mac Jones. So like he has the pressure to hit, like be par. Like if he goes par, and par this year is higher than par was last year, like if he continues to improve, he'll escape a lot of the criticism with, like Mike mentioned, or I think Mike mentioned the OC changing and the new additions and some of that stuff. So he does have a little bit of a pass, but I mean, it's still the Patriots. Like they still have the stigma about them. Like if they don't advance in the playoffs this year, it's going to be like, well, what happened the last 3 years? That's when I think the pressure will really start to hit.
Yeah.
If not Mac, it'll hit Bill. It'll cause some change, hopefully, if the season ends poorly, like we're kind of talking about. But I think Tua, I mean, he's got to do something. I mean, they got to do something with them.
We don't need to go into it too far. And obviously he's bought himself so much time with the success that they've had. But like you just said there, those last 3 years, we know there was already a rift between the Kraft Belichick relationship that centered around Brady. It's gonna be really interesting if this is a huge step back this year. And it's just like, where is this team going? And you've got a very old head coach. How does Kraft look and say, we want to get back to winning? So we don't need to go into a full conversation on that, but it is interesting where it's like things go south. what does the, next 2 to 3 year outlook look like for the New England Patriots?
Are we going to the standings next?
Let's go. Yeah, let's anything else on the Dolphins?
I'm good.
No. Okay, cool. The only thing I'd say is interested to see how they look on defense because there's so many coaches that make a defense good. And Brian Flores went to Miami and instantly made them ferocious on defense. They got guys that I like. They bring in Melvin Ingram, got a good secondary, like we were saying, with Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, who's going to be out for a little bit. They've drafted some young guys, Javon Holland out of Oregon at safety, and who's the fucking edge rusher? It is Jalen Phillips out of Miami, first round pick last year. But just going to be an interesting season for them. All right, and take 2. Technical difficulties. My computer massively fucked up last night. What, Teddy? What was that for?
Right as I unmuted, I made a crazy noise with my mouth. I don't know if you guys could hear it. It was right as I unmuted and it went like. Rrr.
We're on the fritz right now, boys. We are recording this a day after the part that you just listened to cut out. My computer, it just took a giant poo-poo. We lost the audio. If you guys wanted, we could just play the video part and try and mimic whatever we were saying beforehand. But anyways, we're back here recording on Wednesday night, podcast coming out September 1st. Really where it cut out, we were just getting into our predictions, had already talked through the team. So boys, we are just going to rip it to our standings, get the fuck out of here and call it a day. So we're going to go 1st through 4th in the division, record predictions, and will they or won't they make the playoffs? Mike, let's start with you.
All right. So first place, I got Bills 14-3. They're going to make the playoffs. AFC, number 1 seed in the AFC. I think they drop the 3 games to the Dolphins in week 3. The Packers, and then probably the Pats last week of the season. Got Fins 9-8, not making the playoffs, just squeaking out. I think they have a better year, but just miss it. Pats in 3rd, 7-10, no playoffs, and Jets at 6-11. I do see a scenario where the Pats could be worse than the Jets, but the Zach Wilson news kind of puts me a little bit more down on the Jets.
Yeah. Hey, we did this yesterday, and it didn't save. We are pretty aligned on that, so I fuck with it. But Scott, send it over to you. How do you have things rolling out in the AFC East?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went a little different than Mike in terms. Mike said he wasn't biased. I don't know if he said it, but he said it last night. I went extremely biased on these rankings. I have the Bills 12-5. I'm just really hoping that the Bills can lose 2 games in division, 1 to the Pats, 1 to the Fins. I hope they have some other bullshit losses. So I'm really hoping that the Jets don't really stand a chance against the Bills.
Please.
Other than that, I've got the Patriots coming up in 2nd, 10-7. I do have them making the playoffs. That's part of the homer pick because, to be honest, I really don't know if I believe that the Patriots, or not even just the Patriots, 10-7 probably doesn't get you into the playoffs in the AFC this year. Everyone's just too stacked over in the West side. The 2nd or 3rd, I have the Fins finishing at 10-7 as well. The Patriots have the tiebreaker, so that's why they're in the playoffs over the Fins. The Fins are really good. They make me a little nervous. We've touched on that earlier. I just still think they're the Fins. The Patriots should just always beat the Fins and be ahead of the Fins in the standings. And then to round it out, the Jets at 7-10. Again, I'm not sure if I'm reiterating what I said earlier, but the Jets at 7-10, I feel like would be their expectations. I think that's the bar. 6-11, you're looking at it like, yeah, it's an okay year. They did what they had to do. 7-10, I think that's going to be the ultimate like curve up. Let's start building on something. I do think they probably have that in them with the new management, with the way Douglas has been doing things, but not making the playoffs. Never going to make the playoffs ever again. 7-10 to round it out.
I like it. Teddy, what do you think here in 7-10 there? I know you're going to get into your
fucked
picks.
Up what he said. I was gonna say I agree with him for a lot of what he said about the Jets, but so number 1, I got the Bills. I have them at 13-4. I just think they're gonna kind of run things. Probably be the number 1 seed in the AFC. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. For me, I'm just a little lower on the division, I guess, and I want to be biased and have the Jets at 2nd. So I got the Jets in 2nd place, finishing with a record of 8-9. Not a winning record, but I do think that if the Jets can step up to 8 wins this year, I mean, that's a huge step in my opinion from where they were last year, hovering around 500. I agree with what Scott said about their kind of expectations being around 7 wins. But you know, I think if things break right for them a little bit, I think they can get to 8 and 9. Then I have the Finns at 8 and 9. I think kind of a similar story. I think they're going to be a good team, but you know, I'm sorry, guys. Tough schedule. I got a lot of losses, and I'll finish it off with the Pats 7 and 10. First time they're going to be bad in a while. God damn it. Fuck you, Mac Jones. And let's go over, and I'll stop talking now.
This is hilarious. So Teddy always burps during normal episodes because we're usually drinking or he just has to burp. And tonight it's the hiccups. So I'm glad we got to get a glimpse of that. We wouldn't have gotten this. See if the audio, you know, had worked perfectly yesterday. So yeah. And you're muting yourself for most of them. It's just when you have to talk that it's fucked. But all right, Teddy, I gave you shit for it. I'll still give you shit for it. Second in the division for the Jets is kind of funny. I understand, you know, wanting to kind of fade the rest of the division. I'm fading a couple of the teams, but I don't know. It's the Dolphins have really scared me the last few weeks, as I've already, you know, reiterated. But how I have the division falling out, same first place team as everybody else, 14-3 with the Bills, same as what Mike had predicted. Second place, I'm buying into the Dolphins, 10-7, going 4-2 in the division. That offense is going to be a nightmare to deal with. And they don't need Tua to be great. They just need him to be average. Third place, 1-5 in the division. They got the tiebreaker with over the fourth place Jets. That's the New England Patriots at third. Really, when it came down to rest edge, strength of schedule, and all of the shenanigans, I'm just going to sell it. And the downfall is going to happen at some point for the dynasty, just like at some point Brady's going to take a step back. Belichick is going to kind of phase out of the NFL, and I'll just say maybe it happens this year. And then the Jets, like I said, tied for fourth place at 6-11 there. For the first 12 weeks, I think I had them going like 1-10 or 2-9, whatever it ended up being. But it's going to be kind of like last year where it was really lousy. And then, you know, the team had some wins late in the season, rattled things off where it was building hope for the next year. But that's how I have things folding out. We're pretty much on the same page, you know, first place. We're a little spread on Dolphins and the rest, but anything else that you guys want to add in before we send things away?
Good.
Yeah,
good.
I'm just looking forward to football, man. It's been a long last 6 months.
It has. Teddy.
Yeah, boys, I'm happy we did this. We got the group chat, and even we got the group chat together, and even with some technical difficulties, I think we put together an all right episode. So yeah, I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Exactly. I'm impressed with us being able to do 2 nights in a row. We made it available Tuesday and Wednesday. But thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Chasing 69. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at NYJ_Chasing69. Teddy at Teddy Huncho. I'm at Blake Andrew Pace. Mike and Scott, I don't know if you guys even care about putting your Twitters out there. I don't know if you need to.
Scott Graham 3 or Scott Graham 333.
A lot of Dion Waiters content there.
The GOAT. Don't bet on yourself and double down.
There you go. I got nothing to promote. I'm good.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.
See ya.
They don't. We just talk after.
Did they just leave? I was like, that's wild. It's like a meeting.
Well, because they just like they heard me say, see you next week.
Peace. All right.